we start the panel discussion, and I would like to invite all the panelists and the chair for the session, Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary DST, to kindly chair the session. And now I request all the panelists, Mr. Rajesh Mathur, Chairman FICCI Committee on Geospatial Technology. I would request Mr. Uday to kindly have the seat. Mr. M.L. Srivastava, I think he would also join us a little late. Dr. Peter Woodgate, welcome, sir. Mr. Nikhil Kumar, Co-Chair, FICCI Committee on Geospatial Technology, sir. Dr. Ranjana Kaul, she would also be joining us a little late. And Mr. Wing Commander Satyam Kushwaha. Sir, I would like to request Honorable Chair of the panel, Professor Ashutosh Sharma, to kindly start the panel discussion. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so what we are going to discuss, debate, brainstorm here is a comprehensive policy, a national geospatial policy, which clearly is required for our development, governance, planning, everything else. So we need a policy which balances between the seemingly conflicting demands of development versus security of all kind. At the same time, there's a policy that ought to cover geospatial data, products, services, and solutions. And we should take into account the fact that there are many different activities that go on in this business. So there it starts with data acquisition, manipulating data, value adding on the data in somebody else's data, attribute data and merging of that with geospatial data, data sharing and dissemination, and applications. Now, so these are different dimensions of activities that go on, starting from acquiring to manipulating to disseminating to sharing, all of that. And then who are the people who do this, right? So there are government agencies which are mandated to acquire data, to generate data, to manipulate data. There are other government departments which are user departments, so we have to also look at, well, how do they get data that they can use? There are private players, and they can be of two different kinds. Those which are authorized by a government department to collect data or to do anything with the data, or private players who do it on their own, but they are not outsourced from a government department. So, well, there are the third parties that do something with it. Then you also have to think about whether they are Indian or they are foreign entities. Are they registered? Do we need registration? Do we need regulatory aspects into this? Which part should be covered by regulations? Which part ought to be free, and so on? And then we should factor in all of this, in policy making, the rise of modern technology. So you say, are there special stuff which is needed for remote sensing, satellite systems, mobile phones, web services, location-based services, cores, and so on. Just to give you some ideas. So I think we need a very holistic framework. And I'm sure that we don't have to reinvent all of it, but we need to adapt some of it from the best practices around the world, taking into account our own unique situations and context. Okay, so I think we get the ball rolling there. I say, look, what are the different things that we may wish to discuss? So these are, well, what are the basic overarching principles of this policy? How do they relate to existing policies? How they may relate to existing policies elsewhere? What is the applicability of the policy? Access of geospatial data, open access versus registered versus restricted access, standards and quality, what are the implementation guidelines and actions? Of course, you have to figure in somewhere IPR and cyber security related issues as well. What kind of committees or authorities are needed for implementing, for steering, Pricing can be an aspect. So depending on who is doing it, what somebody is doing, what about the pricing aspects, government to government, government to private, private to government, all permutations, combinations, capacity building and legal aspects, and so on.
So I will also start in order for making it easy for people to take up in case they agree to, in terms of the constituent of this geospatial framework, policy framework. So what is that geospatial, what are the constituents of geospatial policy framework? To me, there are 4 or 5 things. I will start with the society. Who is society? Let me qualify that. So society for me, GIS professional. Society for me, policy makers. Society for me is users, consultants. This is what I call society. The second important constituent is goods. Let me qualify, let me define the goods. What is goods? So the geospatial product, it could be geospatial data, it could be geospatial map, other contents, models, applications. That's what goods. The third part is the infrastructure, physical infrastructure. What could be the physical infrastructure? So web, mobile, LAN, etc. So this could be the physical infrastructure. What could be the technical infrastructure? The standards like Web 2, service-oriented architecture. This for me is a technical infrastructure. And the last is a user, how the user would like to consume it or share it. So for me, these are the 4 or 5 important aspects. So the society, the goods, the technical infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, and the user. Now, in order for me to give my thoughts as to what the policy framework should be, comes from as to what the trends in the geospatial has been in last 2 decades that I have been able to see. So the trend is, to begin with, I will start with the data part. Now, how was data shared earlier? Primarily, it was very, I will say, top to bottom approach, like FTP data share. That's what we began with. Then we came to the clearinghouse, which was still very data intensive and specific. However, there was a degree of technology involved. So there was web involved, but still it was very data intensive. So from FTP, which was a file transfer mode, to clearinghouse, now we are coming up to top bottom approach, which is basically geospatial portal, which allows integration of multiple services not specific to data, and not specific to accessibility, but integration of whether it is a model or it is an application or it is data, mashing it up and allowing a new service to be created and then share. So there is a huge amount of processing capability involved with this geoportal when I talk of. So my trend start with the data part. The second part is integration of services. Before we get into integration of services, there are different IT and geospatial protocol which allows you for creating those services. How are those services created? And so the services are created, mostly these are RESTful services, which could be Silverlight, Flex, everything, Java. Now, this is very easy to consume it. It's very open, standard based. So this RESTful services, which are very open in standard, which are discoverable, which are very accessible, are being created. How are that created? Earlier it was point to point. Now from point to point, it is becoming a very loosely coupled orchestrated services, which allows you multiple geoprocessing capability to be incorporated for the services or application you are trying to address. Now, within this framework, people who are creating, who are they? They are everybody. I mean, not limited to GIS professional, they are users, because we are talking of crowdsourcing data, which is creating huge impact in the way data is consumed and improved upon, accentuated. So these are the people, GIS professionals, the normal users, they are creating these services, and thereby they are basically creating this framework. Now this framework, as the chairman of the session has just said, could be from government to citizen and could be vice versa. So the framework has changed. It's not only G to C, it could be C to G. It could be G to B, government to business. It could be government to academia and back, because government needs a lot of inputs for incorporating them in their planning process. So this is, in a nutshell, a framework. So when I say framework, it's basically accessibility, usability, sharing, and collaboration of these 5 things that I talk about, whether it is map, model, services, application, content, everything that could be done. How could that be provided for in terms of the policy? So there are multiple things that needs to be done. One is the technology part. So we can vouch for as to how technology in multiple user cases. If somebody wants, for instance, just to find the data, now there should be technology portal we should allow by putting up general keywords so that you are able to pinpoint to the data of your specificity. If somebody wants a higher level detail layer to be generated, then it should be very advanced searchable way of getting to that layer of data. If somebody wants to just download the data, he should be able to identify the area of importance and be able to download through services. And there are services which allows you for doing that. If somebody wants to share, accordingly, same way the services should be allowing him to be able to share something which he believes is very, very high importance in terms of any program, whether it is government or citizen-centric. Now, when we talk about this, technology, of course, comes up, policy framework, which is more in terms of administrative. Third is the IT part, which has 2 connotations. One is the cyber side, from the security perspective, and secondly, gyver side, which is from geospatial information side. And both have 2 different standards. And towards the end, the security aspects. All these 4 parts should be brought in for higher level of deliberation with the domain experts for us to be able to create this geospatial framework. Thank you.
Thank you, that was very well put. Can I start by congratulating the Survey of India, and particularly Dr. Rao, for a magnificent achievement, 250 years of the founding of the Survey of India. That suggests to me that you have a long and deep history of expertise and capability in this very important area. And that is significant because I think there are 4 key elements to making a framework work in the context of India. The first one is government, the second one is the research and university sector, the third one is the private sector, and the fourth one are the people. In order for the nation to capture the maximum benefits of spatial technologies over the next decade and beyond, the nation will benefit by having a clear roadmap of the role of each of those 4 sectors. Why is that important? First of all, because government's critical role is in setting policy and in setting strategy for the nation. Having done that, the private sector can then, with far more confidence, determine where it should put its investments and where the business opportunities are. We know that certainty on behalf of the private sector brings greater investment. With those 2 in place, the research and university sector can be far more confident about the investments they need to make in critical research outcomes as well as in capacity building. And we've heard a lot about capacity building this morning. Fundamentally important. Never more important these days because the rate of change of the spatial technologies is phenomenal. And the degree to which spatial technologies have been taken up by all sectors of society is still relatively low. Therefore, we move to the citizens. Now, there is no doubt that just about everybody in society today, and certainly into the future, are going to be impacted by spatial technologies. We are going to see a huge change in the way lives are affected. These are disruptive technologies, and while there is enormous societal and economic uplift through these technologies, there is also the consequential effect on people's jobs. So there is a critical role to play on behalf of government and the university sector to help educate those who are currently in industries that are likely to be disrupted, and to help reskill or introduce new skills to enable people to transfer from those industries across to the sunrise industries. There is evidence to suggest that this could work well. In the Australian context, we are seeing the new economy, that's the digital economy and the web-based economies, together with the services that they bring, replacing jobs from the old economies, that's manufacturing, mining and so on, at a rate of 5 to 1. So the opportunities are presenting themselves. In order to make the most of this then, I come back to my first point, which is the need to have a clear strategy which is publicly articulated, which is built with all the critical components coming from all the key sectors introduced, and most importantly, kept up to date so that it moves as the external environment moves. Thank you.
I'll put NIC's perspective in the sense that the how we are handling data, as Nikhil has mentioned, data has become very dynamic, and it flows from different directions, from your mobile, from your web, and from many directions. Even governments focus on different schemes, Swachh Bharat Mission, Prime Minister's Awaaz Yojana. You need to capture the location. Location has become key. Even the projects which NIC is supporting, the NoFun project, where we are creating data, where the OFC network has been established, the ONT node, the Gram Panchayat node. So it is coming through mobile. So the data dynamic, data proliferation has increased in the past 2-3 years, and we are looking at an enabling policy which allows us to make this data available to the public in an easier manner. So the policy framework should basically address, in my view, it should be enabling rather than restricting. If you now look at the policies, the policy talks about what scale and all. In this dynamic world of data creation, what can I talk about my data? Is it 50,000 scale? Is it 10,000 scale? It is scale independent. If it is scale independent, how can I, where to go and where to obtain the permissions? We have created a Bharat Map portal where we are now adhering to the policy and showing what is feasible. But can we make it more dynamic? Can you make it more accessible to public? I have seen, if you go to forums, there is a lot of challenge regarding getting data. I have seen people struggling to create maps. Whereas in government we have a lot of data, but we need an enabling policy to make this data available to the public. The policy framework, in that context, I will see that it should be more enabling, and it will ease our burden of the IT organization which is creating the systems, which can provide this data within the keeping the security aspects in view. We should be able to provide the services to the people in a more easier and affordable manner. That is my perspective on the data, on the policy.
The point of availability of geospatial data comes in. See, earlier it was the map users and the map restriction policy and all. Now it is map users are now the geospatial professionals. Now everybody, there is a sudden, the rise in demand for the geospatial data. It is a phenomenal rise. Suddenly there is so much demand that everybody wants the data. Fortunately, as a national survey and mapping agency, we have started an initiative, and we sort of put a mechanism in place to solve this problem to some extent. That is what in the presentation we have indicated, that is OSM and DSM series. Okay, open series maps are the maps in digital form that are available now, freely available. Like this is a major step that we have taken in this country. Earlier, because I have seen in my 34 years of service in Survey of India, the availability of maps, whether it is restricted or non-restricted, even that was difficult. Now, to some extent, to a greater extent, I would say, we have solved that problem. Now, the question of this thing is that after putting the OSM maps on the web, earlier also, a lot of OSM maps were sold in digital form, but I have no case, I never saw a case where the OSM map has been contested by any agency for its content. Like nobody says that we need something further than this. Okay, what I am suggesting is that if the availability of geospatial data, to what extent, that is also is to be required. Like making a balance between the security and the developmental issues. This data, the data content of the maps to be decided. So we have already a mechanism in place, a system in place. I think we can follow that, and only thing is, based on the suggestion, this can be improved. This can continuously be updated. This is what I feel that we should do. And secondly, I see two big problems in the future, two impending problems in the geospatial data domain. That are, one is that because of the increased capability of mobile day by day, see the restriction on any kind of data, leave alone geospatial data or any kind of data, is going to be, what I say, more and more complex and difficult. That is one area. And the second thing is that on the hardware side, the drones. Okay, these are the two problems. I think drones, of course, have become a menace now already. It is a problem. With respect to geospatial data, they are going to play a big role, and there also, I think we have to think about that. But anyway, as far as the geospatial data is concerned, my thinking is that if we have, the Government of India has already put a system in place. I think keeping that, revolving around that mechanism, I think we should think on improvements. And that's it.
I just want to touch on 3 or 4 aspects which to me are very fundamental to the success of geospatial technology absorption and adoption in our country. Policy is only one of the enablers, but not the only enabler. For instance, capacity building. Honorable Secretary talked about it earlier. When you look at capacity building, there are 3 stakeholders in the whole process of adoption of these technologies in any organization. One would be the leadership. In government context, leadership would be senior bureaucrats, CEOs of public sector organizations, CEOs in the private sector. Then the next would be the actual users, you may call it business, the department heads, conservator of forest in the forest department, senior engineers in PWDs and so on. And the third, and the one that we normally tend to focus on most of the time, are the technology folks. The people who are creating applications, people who are creating data sets, people who are designing architectures. And here again, we often get lost in focusing on bright young MTechs who come out of universities. That's only one of the requirements, but not the only requirement. We need solution architects. We need database analysts. We need top-class project managers. And we need developers who work on state-of-the-art technology to create applications. So when we look at a capacity building program, we need to focus on each of these categories of people and see how we can expose them to technologies. How do we make leadership aware of the benefits of geospatial? How do we make user organization, user department heads understand how this technology will make a big difference to the way they carry out the existing processes, create willingness on their part to re-engineer those processes so that location can be embedded in the existing workflows and business processes. So there's one aspect which logically should be an extension of the geospatial policy, but it should be addressed very carefully, because without that, we'll have policy, but it won't necessarily lead to wide-scale adoption of this technology. The second part is, again, policy is an enabler, but you also look at the back-end supply side. How do we prepare national mapping organizations like Survey of India, Geological Survey, Census Department, Forest Survey of India, and other mapping agencies, the members of the NSDI, for instance. How do we prepare them to create data which the users require? So we may have a great policy, but back-end of the supply chain is not addressed. it may not really deliver the service that we want to get out of it. I think the national mapping organizations, and it's a very appropriate occasion being the 250-year celebration of Survey of India. National Mapping Agency had to recognize that their role is changing. I know it's a very provocative statement with so many officers of Survey of India sitting, and I may get lynched before I can step out of this hall. But these are relevant points which we must be conscious of. For the last 250 years or so, Survey of India has been a survey and mapping organization. And it will continue to be that for the next 250 or whatever number of years. However, when users look at Survey of India, they say, yes, we need high quality cartographic maps, but your real business today is creating geospatial data products. That's what users are going to make use of. And therefore, the end product that comes out of mapping agencies like SY and others have to be GIS ready. Somewhere in Nakshe, I saw the term being used, if you know the sheet number, enter it. I think we have to move beyond the concept of sheet. The user says, I don't know what sheet number I want. This is my area of interest. So from sheet to area of interest is a paradigm shift in the way we look at data. We also have to recognize the concept of just-in-time maps because requirements keep changing, and especially if you look at some of the maps like urban maps and many other, the shelf life of a database could be a few months, and therefore we have to build in mechanism to maintain currency of these databases on an ongoing basis. And last but not the least, how do we make them available? Fortunately, technology has reached a stage where you don't have to provide data on a CD. You may not have to even provide data as a direct download. What you really need, what the users need, is access to data as a service. They want to embed the data into their own application through open APIs and consume it as a service to deliver the end product that they want. It could be a decision support system, it could be an analytics platform, or whatever. And the user could be anybody. So what we're really looking at is shift from the current data production techniques to maybe an enterprise data production and dissemination platform. We start from data capture going all the way to service delivery to the end user. So a paradigm shift in the way mapping agencies prepare themselves to meet the requirements of their end users. One or two other quick points. The secretaries have talked about IPR and pricing and all. These are very critical points because who owns the intellectual property? Clearly the creator of the data. But then as you add more feature layers on top of it, as you consume it as a service and create a derived map, who owns the IPR for that product? Because the underlying technology, underlying the product is still coming from one of the mapping agencies. Do they have the IPR? Does the creator of that, what you will call a valued product, own the IPR? And these are very fundamental issues which should protect the interest of those who are investing in those data creation. And linked to that would be pricing. Again, we have different models globally. The US model says any data created using public money must be made available to public at no cost. Where the British model is different, it's very business oriented. They say it should be priced, and there's Ordnance Survey Board which is handling all the commercial aspects of that, and they say unless we collect money against the product we deliver, how could we reinvest it into maintaining the data and enhancing its capabilities? So again, there are two schools of thought, if you may use that term. We have to see what the right approach. Maybe both are relevant depending on the end user application. If it's for a commercial purpose, it should be priced. If it's a citizen-centric service, maybe it should not be priced. But the policy has to address those aspects. And last point I like to make is standards. We have to mandate standards. And just one other point I missed it, so with your permission, just another minute or two. Collaboration. I think sharing collaboration is a huge challenge. A few years ago, I think in 2008, Ministry of Power launched RAPDRP, Restructure Accelerated Power Reforms and Development Project, with the objective of bringing out major reforms in the power distribution companies. A huge amount of money was allocated to use of geospatial technologies. And the biggest challenge all the GI solution providers who were engaged in the project was to get the base map for it. They knew they are available, they knew where they are available, but they didn't have access to them, even though they were required for another government project. As a result, they had to recreate all those BAPE maps. I think we lost at least 2, if not more, years in rollout of that project, implementation of that project, and the cost went up by several hundred crores because as a policy we didn't mandate sharing of data which is already available with some other agency for a project of this kind, for any project matter. So we must mandate the sharing of data with other users. Thank you.
Geospatial policy we are talking about, and what I gathered from the other speakers and other panelists and what Mr. Mathur was just mentioning, most of the important facets of the prospective geospatial policy have been covered. I will talk from the user's point of view. I have my experiences in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, and I was in Forest Service of India also for nearly 3 years, and currently in the Ministry of Culture. And how the use of geospatial data and geospatial technology in the government schemes, and where the policy should address these particular issues. Policy should be inclusive with outreach, that is very well known. It is an enabler. The data, geospatial data along with the attribute data, whatever is available, it has 3 particular facets. First of all, we should know what is the content, what is the data available at different remotely locations. Many a times we keep on doing the reinventing of wheel. I mean, some data is already available. We start creating the same data again and again because different organizations, different agencies are not talking to each other, and there is not a particular platform through which one can interact and know what is available and what is not available. Then the question of standardization is there. We face this a lot of such problems even after getting all these different softwares, very expensive softwares. They were not talking to each other, although we say that these are OGC compliant and all that, but in Forest Service of India we were facing this problem, very severe problem. So standardization is a very important aspect, and all this data should be interoperable. I mean, my data is usable for the other, and others' data I am also able to use it. And then comes the outreach and delivery systems. Secondly, what I particularly feel that the policy must address, I mean, it should not be in contravention to the extant rules and regulations. There are a lot of limitations on the use of geospatial data, but slowly these are being taken care of. Certain map sheets, these are not open source. Certain border area map sheets, these are not available to us. So the policy must address this issue that there should not be any contravention to the extant rules and regulations, whether it is Forest Conservation Act, whether it is other government acts. Secondly, like I can tell you the example of the Ministry of Environment and Forest. We have made use of geospatial data and geospatial technology very extensively, and it can be a model for many other departments. And in fact, I am currently in the Ministry of Culture, and we are using it in a very elaborate manner. So geospatial data, the feedback from the user's perspective of this various different applications, this is very important aspect, what I particularly feel. That from our perspective, we think that this particular methodology is very good for the end user, but unless we get the feedback from their side and they say that no, these are the interventions required. So users conferences, I think FICCI has arranged many such conferences, is equally important, and that should be factored in the policy making also. use of geospatial data in collaboration with ISRO. We are making good use of Bhuvan platform. The same is now being done in the Ministry of Culture also, and we have recently developed various applications for Survey of India Amasra monuments, the monuments covered under the Amasra the Act. So the outreach from the point of origin of that particular application and to the end user and its feedback, and then this complete cycle is taken care of. This is very important from the in this particular context. Other basic aspects already have been taken care of. I will not dwell upon those things. I think as the conference progresses, we will further interact. Thank you.
I would initially just give a brief insight into some of the issues that have been highlighted by my predecessors here, and thereafter talk a bit about the policy and the security aspects of it. When we are trying to develop our geospatial domain in this country, we need to see from the historical perspective as to how it has evolved, and as of today, where are we, and what is the vision we need to kind of put in place to be able to take India through the journey that our present leadership is wanting us to take. Historically, I mean, the way Survey of India evolved, which played a very, very fundamental role in the initial formative years, it was, basically British control, where there are a lot of, security dimensions applied in terms of security of information. If you see the journey that took place post-partition, again, because of variety of restrictions, without going into the reasons of that, the restrictions continued. Now, because of that, we've seen a siloed approach in terms of development of this domain, and primarily whatever major development that could take place maybe did not happen the way because of various policy restrictions that were placed, and they are still relevant today in some cases, and that's what is coming out with the various speakers that have been expressing their views. The second thing is we also need to look at is that while we are trying to internally refine ourselves, there are a lot of projects that, or rather committees in place, a lot of initiatives being undertaken right now to bring a change in the policy paradigm itself right now. But when we are debating these, so you have one side which is talking of the security, one side is the development, one side is the people enablement. Now, when we are trying to look at these things, we need to really see that the kind of restrictions that we are trying to impose, are they relevant today in terms of technology, or are we going to become irrelevant if we continue with the same thought? I think this is a very important thought process that we need to put in our processes, because the way world is moving and the way technology, science, engineering outside is moving towards infrastructure development, unless and until we find innovative ways to make available that data, we are going to be left behind. And as has been brought out today, data. Now, there are a lot of facets that are associated with data. One is the availability and sharing itself. Is it lying in my cupboard? I'm very happy that the data is there, but I cannot share it. So what is that data being used for? I mean, it's waste of government money. Similarly, within the government, can I share this data or not? What is the use of just keeping it unless and until there's something very, very important in terms of intelligence value which cannot be shared? So I think we need to break those silos in our minds that between the government, the data needs to flow freely. And I'm very glad that Secretary DST, in our interactions which we've had, he's taken this bold step and he's trying to look at this aspect. The next aspect is that the quality of data that we are holding, does it serve our requirements of today and the next 15-20 years? If not, what is required to be done? We need to implement it at a faster pace. It will be in terms of regularity of data, updation of data, quality of data. There's a huge amount of it. And I'm happy that now DST is looking very seriously at it, and they are looking, I know they're working towards it. The next aspect is about, this itself will involve a lot of data capture. Now, whether the policies that are existing today support that data capture or not. Unfortunately, because of various restrictions, Finally, we have various ministries who have come out with various programs. But finally, where the problems come in are the various restricted policies that are in place. So we are taking a look at it. There's a system that has been put in place which is examining this issue with a great deal of granularity, because we have some very important policies, but they are following different approaches to how security restrictions are to be applied. One is very open, one is very restrictive. So we need to harmonize this, and the harmonization part of it, and trying to decide what are the principles by which an information should be considered classified, secret, open. This aspect is now been seeing with a lot of we were being very open about it, and we've interacted with the industry also. Now internally discussions are on, and I hope that very soon we should be able to at least come out with some kind of guidelines which a private agency can just take it down and say that, okay, if I adhere to these, I'm not violating anything. So the kind of best practices that need to be followed. This would also mean that once we have these in place, it will allow the government agencies to effectively use the strength of the Indian private sector, which is doing a great job in serving outside countries today. But today I'm not able to utilize them for Indian jobs. So how do I get them into my own system and improve the national capacity as a part, taking the Indian private sector as a part of the comprehensive national park? At least we need to looking at that. And for that, what are the enabling guidelines that we need to look at? I think it's time that we start putting those actions in place. They also need to, the kind of frameworks that we are looking at, the kind of institutions that we have, they were fine at the time when we have achieved independence, maybe 20, 30, 40 years down the line. But today, geospatial domain is a very interwoven nature, where things are cross-linked. So we cannot do with regulations 1.0 for India of 2.0 with a vision of 3.0. They need to just leapfrog and take a new look. And I am glad that the leadership above us has been sensitive to that, and they have given us that kind of guidance to come out with policies that are progressive. And for that, even like the various organizations that are represented here, like FICCI, AGI, SAMA, we are kind of involved with them and trying to come out with their perspective about how the industrial strategy, say, for a geospatial domain should be shaped. And I am sure that in my discussion that we've had with the Secretary DST, we should be now looking at national geospatial development goals and a vision, that encapsulate all other dimensions which are associated with the geospatial domain. And we come out with some actionable strategies as to how do we do it in a phase-wise manner, what should be in short term, medium term, long term, so that we solve national problems. The national problems today are youth. You need to engage them, you need to give them jobs, you need to have their infrastructure in place. Now, all these areas, geospatial can play a very, very important role. It just depends on how you want to imagine utilizing the data effectively. Then I would also like to talk about the clearance mechanisms that I was talking about some time back. We are also in the process of refining the kind of clearance mechanism that we have, so that it is more responsive, time bound, and more transparent. I'm sure we would come out with something better soon. And I would like to acknowledge the positive role being played by MOD in this regard, and as well as the ADG Military Service Office. We are kind of engaged with them, and let the results come out, then let them take the lead in sharing their whatever they are doing. Then the aspect of capacity building, capability building, and innovation. I think these are very interlinked, and we need to support this. And there are a lot of startup programs that have, policies that have come out. I think that probably the industry can partner with the universities, and this I learned very, I was interacting with some of our friends in Australia, recently, and they have a very fantastic program where the academia, industry and the government are working. So we can probably take some lessons from them and see how the industrial value can be created by having successful development and innovation models by effectively utilizing the academia. Sadly, what's happening is, I'm myself doing an academic program right now, and when I speak to students in the universities who are my fellow students, and the biggest thing that I find is they have no clarity whether I will get a job or not. And this is one of the major areas where innovation, because he doesn't know what is his future. When I ask him, what are you going to do after the both, I don't know. I mean, that is the first question, the answer that I get. So I think that when we are making models for development, if we are able to show a good career to that student, you will start getting good quality people into this domain. And I think the strength of India lies in the innovative power of its youth. And this is where we need to really catalyze our industry. And this is where the industry itself has to play a lead role by not just sticking to the normals that we are doing today. Then interesting thing that is happening globally and that is happening at a UN GGIM level is there's a lot of statistical information that is required now. When we need to integrate with the sustainable developmental goals which are coming out. And these are very important even for the functioning of the government of India, because all the national programs, they need data. Unfortunately, what's happened is that most of our data lying in Excel sheets with various ministries. So if some kind of a lead initiative is taken in converting, and it's not a major rocket science to convert Excel sheets into actionable, just need to link it with certain shape files and we can get going. So this is one area I think where without waiting for policies to open up, work can start, and we could do something about it. And the last thing, sir, I would like to highlight is that, and this is an idea that I took from ma'am, which when we had our meeting at the SA to RM's office there, that the data needs to be start now be considered as dual use. And because it has both a strategic dimension as well as a development dimension. So when we are trying to make policies, we need to come out with a balance on that. And once we have that balance right, I am sure that the right amount of energy that will get infused into this policy itself. That's my initial comments.
What the upshot of it all really is that if we are to achieve all of these wonderful things that have been spoken about here at this table, I'm sure in the conference and many other such meetings that I have attended pertaining to GIS and how is it that we should go forward. So the starting point of it would have to be to reinvent the wheel conceptually. Exactly what Satyam just said. We need to have a mechanism by which the leadership that Mr. Mathur was talking about and the leadership that is able to, without having to engage in internal battles, seamlessly think about the fact that there is India 02 at the moment. And that dual use would mean that conceptually you move away from the concept of attributing only military value to GIS, which of course it is, that is not a debatable point at all and not open, but that it has value which is for civil use. And this is demonstrated by everybody present over here. Importantly, the government itself, the DATI some time ago, issued a GIS policy, which the sum and substance of it was to promote civil use of GIS in the context of digital India. So when a government agency itself says that, look, there is a civil use attribute, and we are here today with Survey of India, Ministry of Defence, Security, everybody, I feel very happy because finally everybody is coming together and saying the same thing. But the starting point for any policy is a conceptual framework. And so while there is security related attribute, there is civil. That civil attribute is also subdivided. First, our government departments themselves, as we had somebody from culture, And I've heard other government departments also wanting to use it, urban development and so on. Then you have the private sector, all of you over here. And the third, which nobody is talking about, is the ordinary individual such as myself, who is a taxpayer, which even if at a 0.000 whatever percent, I am contributing to that acquisition, and all that data that is either stored or is being made available with many restrictions at the moment. The second, of course, is the fact that the users in India today are a second generation users. From those early days when we were thrilled out of our minds with Google Earth and all this and constantly going on it, and the government had to nilly-willy amend that map policy or spatial policy to 1 meter from that earlier 5 meters. The fact of the matter is that simply because the private sector was unregulated by the government, which is wonderful, because all of us got suddenly pretty savvy about GIS, how we can use it, what we can do with it. Shall I go abroad and study, come back? Shall I set up an industry? All of those things. Government departments themselves, and NIC, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, was also using Google Map because it was virtually impossible to get any sort of data in a timely manner from the agencies that were responsible for giving it. So here we are, the second generation. But as has been pointed out, the government framework has not changed. It's the same institution informed by the same mindset. So here it is, we are at the cusp. It is not a case that we will be left behind. It is a case that we are left behind. If you were to look at the last 15 years of the rapid development of GIS and the kind of just the sheer quantum of the number of zeros that go with those dollars, which are the revenue that is being generated, and the incredible applications that are happening at the smallest level, you will see that we are restricted by ourselves. We really have nobody else to blame. And so since we've recognized that, we don't have anybody else to blame if we do not get on with the reframing of the conceptual format on the basis of which a GIS policy going forward must be put together. It is not a case that countries in the West that allow access to GIS on the presumption of open access do not care about the security and the sovereignty and the integrity of their country. They do indeed, and they act upon it. So it cannot be said that we are the only ones who care about our national security and therefore there is no way in which you're going to make it available. It doesn't make sense. Today, Google, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, uses 0.65 spatial resolution for base maps. And where those are not available, digital globe, where those are not available, they are using the US Landsat data. So I want to understand that here is an India split halfway through. One which restricts information about India, the other where all the information that you want about India in very good resolution is available. And I can tell you this, it is not a case that companies are going outside and doing for India. They have gone outside. I advise a lot of young startups. Well, they tried to work it out for the last year and a half. These are young people, they don't have the time. Not like, dinosaurs like me and people of my vintage, where wo dheere dheere chalega. It's not that. They want a result here and now, and they know how to therefore say, okay, fine, this is not working for me. Let me go and set up. Now you look at the kind of policies that the United Kingdom, the Germans, almost all European countries have put together to attract. We are talking of brain drain of a certain kind of my generation. This is a second brain drain that is happening here and now. Young people, and I think you met several of them, have actually gone and incorporated companies in Switzerland, in Germany, in England, in France, because they just don't have to bother about all these restrictions. But most of their work is happening here. Now that is something to cheer about, and I'm so glad, because at least they have the passion for India. They have tried for the last year and a half, 2 years to do something for India. They all studied abroad and came back, mind you. But they have gone back there, man, we can't sit and do this. And another way in which they're getting all this information is cloud computing. That is unregulated at the present point in time. You have mobile apps. And then of course, as Rakesh was talking about, the APIs where you can actually use other open source apps and create wonderful commercial products. That is what these children are doing. And if we are talking then pertaining to skilling, it is not just universities. There are people who finish school who go into those universities. Are you going to give them, are you going to ask the Ministry of Health, well, health, yes, but education, for example, when was the last time that we have reviewed our curriculum in schools? Are we up to speed with the requirement of India of 02? And in particular this, can I, if offer geography with computers and some science for my 12th standard? So that in my formative years, when there are half a dozen people who come and talk to children who are in class 10 and 11 and 12 about what is it that you want to grow up, what are the options for your career, for them to at least have the knowledge that something like this exists, and then go to a university which you'd have perhaps connected a dot together with the academia and the industry of going and getting on with it. But none of this will happen. You will not be able to generate jobs here if your conceptual framework that informs a policy is still in that unidimensional mindset. So that's all that I can say about what kind of a policy I truly would like us to come up with. It would be seriously a very national thing to do that.